I want to jump straight into the passage for today. I have a whole verse I'm going to read over you. One verse. This is Hebrews 11, verse 31. And it says, by faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. Today, we're in week 2 of our series, Before the Start, looking at heroes of faith and who they were before they were heroes. And I acknowledge not just that you personally may be in a before the start period of that what God is preparing for you is still yet to come. You have not seen your greatest days of faith or impact. You have not seen your greatest days of significance yet. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what your age is, the confidence of faith believes that they are still yet to come. And we believe that also for us as a church. This exciting season that we're in as Church for the One. And just so you know, like, if you call us Highland Park, it's okay. Like, I don't want you to feel like there's some church police. They're like, welcome to Highland Park. And they're like, that's not going down. And part of the reason for the name change is because I don't know the timetable. At this point in time, we have 48 people committed to the project, to the work in North Lakeland. And we can celebrate that together. We are in the process of looking for space. We don't know that yet. But what we're actually doing, excuse the metaphor if it grosses you out, but we're in the process of giving birth. And that's what churches do. They are meant to extend life. And my wife was pregnant 4 times, and none of those were convenient for me. But I do say it from the context of to say, like, I don't know, like, that process is messy. It's not smooth. And so there's a lot that is going to have to be worked out. There's a lot that we're going to stumble through within the midst of this. I do want to share a little bit because there's some pieces, if you've been a part of this church for a long period of time, there have been churches planted out of this church, projects that were taken on. Just to explain for just a second. Years ago, I had the opportunity with a group of friends to plant a church in Maysville, Kentucky, and it was one of the joys of my life to be able to experience that and do that with them. And I spent all my time developing a website that was very, very ugly and writing sermons and building a strategy. And I remember thinking of it and to go, man, if I could have just spent all that time focused on people, how much further ahead we would have been and how much more God could have worked rather than me worried about HTML code and everything else. And so when we plant in North Lakeland, there will be a live band there for worship. There will be local leadership with Pastor Tim leading that work. And yeah, we'll always celebrate that. Tim, they like you. They're great. I know, shout out to Tippy in Washington, Tim's mom. And one of the things, I want to explain this, I want you to be able to hear this from me, is we will be videoing the message in. And the reason for that is not to extend my voice. And I know there have been churches planted that did that said, hey, we just want to perpetuate this individual's voice. And that is not my desire in any way. The reason for that is to allow local leadership to be entirely focused on the people who are there and the work that is taking place. And that when we can send out culture and vision and strategy and give a group of people, I want to be really clear, North Lakeland is not our convenience strategy. We are not asking you, if you live on the north side, to go and be a part of this work because it is easier for you to get to. We are looking for people who are committed to seeing those around them come to new life in Jesus. And so I share all that to say I believe that the church is never built on the giftings of a few, but on the sacrifices of the many. And so that is the work that we're going to continue to do. This is our own before the start, and I hope throughout this you can find yourself in this. The title of the message today is Exit to Enter. Exit to Enter. High five your favorite 3 people around you. Make it quick. Grab a seat. We got work. The account of Rahab's great faith is recorded in Hebrews 11, but the record of her life comes to us from Joshua chapter 2. The context leading into Joshua chapter 2 is the Israelites have been led out of slavery by Moses, who we touched on last week. And they do not go directly from their enslaved state to the promised land that they desire. There is, let me say it like this, a hallway between the two. The hallway is where it gets tricky for people, because people have such a hard time stepping out of one season and into the next season, because we often expect as soon as I leave what was, I am automatically in what I desire. Does that resonate? But buildings are not designed directly from one room to another room. There's hallways. There are passageways between where you were and where you are called to be. I'm not saying supposed, so I don't want to put that on you. Where you are called to be. And so the Israelites cannot go straight from Egypt to the promised land. It's been said like this, is they went out of Egypt, but it took a while to get Egypt out of them. And if you go straight from your old relationship to your new relationship, you're gonna bring all your dysfunctional habits from your old relationship into your new relationship and turn your new relationship right back into the dynamic of your old relationship. There's hallways, seasons between. And so after 400 years in slavery, the Israelites wander for 40 years in the desert. Scripture calls it wander. I refer to it as detox in the desert. And now they are at the doorstep of the promised land. The problem with the promised land, that's another message series. Bethany, will you write that down? Sometimes when we drive, I'm just like, hey, I have an idea. Would you text me this? Oh, you're putting it on my phone. Cool, gotcha. The series called Problems in the Promised Land. Ooh, I'm excited about that. This message. And so the problem with the promised land is first, the spies who go in describe there as giants in the land. Isn't it amazing how there's always problems in the promised land? Isn't it amazing how the thing that you thought that God would bring to fruition that would be great and incredible always has issues within it? God, give me kids. Make them sleep. God, give me a significant other. Make them less selfish. Oh, less on that? Y'all got real nervous on that. You're like, kids, they're right next to me. You prayed it, don't deny it. And so as they are entering in, they have to figure out not just these issues, but the issue of the walls. Because there are big walls around Jericho that will eventually fall. But first spies are sent in. Joshua chapter 2, it says, then Joshua, son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies from word my mom said I'm not allowed to say in church, so we'll keep going. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there. The king of Jericho was told, look, some of the Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent this message to Rahab. Bring out the men who came to you and entered your house, because they have come to spy out the whole land. But the woman had taken the 2 men and hidden them. She said, yes, the men came to me, but I did not know where they had come from. At dusk, when it was time to close the city gate, they left. I don't know which way they went. Go after them quickly, you may catch up with them. But she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them under the stalks of flax that she had laid out on the roof. So the men set out in pursuit of the spies on the road that leads to the fords of the Jordan. And as soon as the pursuers had gone out, the gate was shut. Before the spies lay down for the night, she went up on the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We have heard how the Lord has dried up the water of the Red Sea. For when you came out of Egypt and what you did to Sihon and Og, the two kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. When we heard of it, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage failed because of you. For the Lord your God is God in heaven above and on the earth below. Can we celebrate that in this moment? That is so significant. See, I need you to see, we'll move on in just a second, but I need you to see what is taking place. Is Rahab, who is in the enemy nation and a citizen of that nation, looks at these two spies and says, our courage in our idols is failing because of how God has worked through you. When we see God move on your behalf, we are now shaken in what we were once confident in that we should have had no confidence in, namely ourselves. And when God moves in your life, I'm preaching to you, I'm not talking about the passage. When God moves in your life, when you let God move in your life, what it does is it creates an apprehension in the individuals of those around you who have put their faith and trust in things that are not eternal. When you let God move and work, it all of a sudden creates this seed of doubt in our cultural idols that maybe success, money, and power are not all that they're cracked up to be, and there is something more significant taking place in the world. Now I'm gonna need you to preach better with me from here on out. Verse 12. Now then, please swear to me by the Lord that you will show kindness to my family because I have shown kindness to you. Give me a sure sign that you will spare the lives of my mother, of my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and that you will save us from death. Our lives for your lives, the men assured her. If you don't tell what we were doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully when the Lord gives us the land. So she let them down by a rope through the window, for the house she lived in was part of the city wall. She said to them, go to the hills so the pursuers will not find you. Hide yourselves for there 3 days until they return, then go on your way. We do not have time to read Joshua chapter 3, Joshua chapter 4, Joshua chapter 5, Joshua chapter 6, in which the Israelites march around the wall. Man, talk about this as getting a word from the Lord as to what you're supposed to do. Because we want the word from the Lord that's the thing we already want to do. God, give me a word. Not that. And so they go, God, what are we gonna do to take the land? He goes, you're gonna march around the wall. And then on the seventh day, here we go, better strategy, you're gonna march around it 7 times. And then you're gonna blow trumpets. Be like, God, give me tanks, trumpets. And the wall falls. In Joshua 6, 24 through 25, it says, then they burned the whole city and everything in it. But they put the silver and gold and the articles of bronze and silver into the treasury of the Lord's house. But Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute with her family and all who belonged to her, because she hid the men Joshua had sent as spies to Jericho, and she lives among the Israelites to this day. And then her life is recorded in Hebrews chapter 11 as a hero of faith, where it says, by faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. Rahab. Woo! It gets a little, like, we don't know what to do with Rahab. Could we acknowledge that? Because, like, she's listed in, like, the account of great faith. It's good, but she's a traitor. That gets a little tricky, right? Because we're like going through, we're like, Moses, Moses, yeah. Peter, Paul, yeah. Rahab. Like, it make you nervous if someone is like, what kind of faith do you want to have? I want to have the faith of Rahab. Guess we're not going to be friends for long. Like, it's weird, right? Like, operating in this, because like, she's amazing. She turns to God. She betrays everyone that she knows. And it's partially the result, the reason why her city is burnt to the ground. We got this like rocky relationship of what do we do with the faith of Rahab? What do we do with the traitor? Even if she turned to God's people, am I the only one who has concern about this? The rest of you are all holy. You're just like, no, I'm good. It's in the Bible, so I'm fine. Like, let me explain it like this. So like, I've got this like stretched, strained relationship with my kids tattling on each other. Because on the one hand, I don't want them to tattle on each other. But on the other hand, it's a great source of information. And like, sometimes I'm like, don't do that. And other times I'm like, where were they? What'd they say? Give me more. Come on, anyone else? And like, sometimes I want to like be at my kids and be like, listen, there are 4 of you. There's only 2 of us. If you band together, the power you would have. But if I can divide them, it's easier to conquer. Does that make sense? I can keep them there. And like, it feels weird because I want to teach my kids like, how do you like helpfully like report information, but not report on everything that you're not supposed to report on your siblings. Does that make sense on the same page? Like, it feels, I don't feel like I'm really in a position as a parent or a pastor to teach my kids, snitches get stitches. So this is what we do instead, is the chore in our house that my kids hate the most is unloading and loading the dishwasher. Like, this is like, oh, this is the worst. Loading and unloading the dishwasher. So we just say, if you tattle on a sibling when you shouldn't tattle, then you have to load and unload the dishwasher. And so we say it like this: snitches get dishes. You can use that on your own, parents. Like, you can go ahead, just take it on your own. Snitches get dishes in our house. And it's like this, it's this weird thing of like, what do we do with the traitor? How do we view someone who is disloyal to her people? Because here's where it gets really tricky, is Joshua is the religious leader of Israel. He was not just considered the military leader, he was considered the leader of faith of the entire nation. And so what Rahab does is she betrays her people in order to give allegiance to the religious leaders of Israel. Are you tracking with me? She betrays her people to give allegiance. She is disloyal to the group that she's with to be loyal to the religious leaders of Israel. And we praise her for it. But isn't that exactly what Judas did? Because that's what Judas did. He was disloyal to the group that he was with to be loyal to the Pharisees and religious sect and the Sadducees, to the religious leaders of Israel. And so we praise Rahab and we admonish Judas. Well, I got 16 more minutes. See, here's what's tricky, is we would describe in our culture that loyalty is a virtue, right? Yeah. 2 of us? Yeah. We describe in our culture that loyalty is a virtue, right? Yeah. Okay, good. But here's the problem, not all loyalty is virtuous. Because if I'm connected to the wrong thing, then I should not be loyal. But if I'm connected to the right thing, then loyalty is a virtue. If I'm connected to the wrong thing, then disloyalty is the virtue I need to practice. Oh, does that make us uncomfortable? The idea that disloyalty is a virtue, just because it was first in your life doesn't mean it needs to be permanent in your life. Just because it was already there doesn't mean it's meant to stay. And so I need to learn that there are some things that were previously in my life that I now need to be disloyal to in order to be loyal to the things that are good. Let me explain it like this. I learned this, I didn't know what it was. In Ohio, we call them burrs. Like when you walk through the woods and you get things stuck to you. Apparently, someone at the 9 a.m. said that you call them hitchhikers in Florida. That is such a better name. I don't know why in Ohio, like hitchhikers make sense. In Ohio, we're like, it's a burr. I don't know who came up with that. Morons came up with it. And so let me explain it like this. I'm walking to church this morning from across the street, and I got my rain jacket on because it's raining this morning, and I've got this little hood, and I've got Velcro. And keep my hood on. I am grateful for the Velcro. The hitchhiker I don't want. The thing that shouldn't be in my life, I do not want to be loyal to it. I want to pick it off. I want it gone. But the Velcro, I need to stay. And if we view things that shouldn't be in our lives as Velcro, we're now not operating in the path that God has for us. Let me make it real simple. If everything in your life you view through the lens of loyalty instead of calling, you will not be able to step into what God has for you. So let me switch the metaphor, okay? Because some of you don't like language of disloyalty. You're like, I'm uncomfortable. So I told the team, I was like, guys, for this week, I really need a door. I need a door for the message. And they looked at me and they went, you are surrounded by doors. I was like, cool, good. All right, so hang with me real quick. So a number of years ago, we're at a restaurant with my kids, and we're there, and my kids looked at the door, and this is what they said, they said, we want to, you can come on in. Welcome to church. How are you? I'm so happy right now. And so my kids looked at the door, and they said, we want to go, we're in the restaurant. They said, we want to go into the outside. Isn't that cute? It just laughed. I was like, no one says that. You exit the inside. You don't enter the outside. The outside is not an entrance. But this is what I thought of, because most of you are parents. You may look at that and you may go, that was dumb. But I'm a pastor. And I'm like, I'm gonna use that. I'm writing that down. So do you see what it says? Thomas, get a little higher. Do you see what it says there? 4 of us are literate. Do you see what it says there? So here's the tricky thing, is we give it the definition by what we're leaving. But every exit is also an entrance. I cannot enter the next room until I exit the current room. And if I want God to do the next thing in my life, it means I must leave some things. For Rahab, she had to be disloyal, exit, in order to step into the thing that God has for her next. Does this make sense? Are we on the same page? Yeah. Every exit in your life is also an entrance. Every entrance in your life needs an exit. Now, this is where it gets really tricky, is I don't always step into the next room. Sometimes I step into a hallway. Sometimes the room that I walk into is not exactly what I thought was going to be next. And so instead of seamlessly walking from one season into the next season, there is a time between in which I am not certain of what is coming next, and I end up where I did not anticipate that I was going to end up. Oh, can I acknowledge how fun this was for me? It's like I got to play hide and go seek with the entire church in this moment. I'm like, woo! So here's the tricky thing, is that if you want God to do something new in your life, come on, is that you? If you want God to do something new in your life, there has to be an exit first. I do not get to step into the next thing that God is doing until I leave the current thing that I was never supposed to be part of. I do not get to be loyal to what God is calling me until I am willing to be disloyal to the thing that was not supposed to be in my life to begin with. Alrighty, let me make sense of this with now spiritual terminology, because I wanted to explain this on a practical level, but I need you to understand what is taking place on a deeper level. Romans chapter 12, verse 2. It says, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. And so we go, yeah, that's good. Like, just quick show of hands. How many of you have read that verse before? Good. I'm judging by general participation, more of you, because some of you refuse to raise your hands, no matter how easy I make it for you. That's fine. So this is how we typically define it, is we go, to conform is to do anything I'm not supposed to do. To transform is to do the thing I'm supposed to do, which is a simplistic understanding that loses the essence of what Paul is actually teaching. And so if you're a note taker, now is the time. If you're not a note taker, now is the time. To conform is to allow my outer world to remake my inner world. To conform is to allow what is happening in my life to remake, reshape, reorder my soul, my spirit, my perspective, my faith, my attitude. To be transformed is for my inner world to remake my outer world. For what is within me to now dictate what is happening in the rest of my life. Let me make it real simple for you first, and then we're gonna preach this together. So yesterday, I'm at HP Sports. HP Sports had playoff day. I wanna pause real quickly, and we don't, I said HP Sports, I did it. Yeah, thank you. The police are after me. Oh my gosh. So I'm at Sports for the One yesterday. And I did it. I was the first one from stage. We had like bets. Who's gonna be the first? It was me. I lose. So I'm at Sports for the One. Yesterday we had playoff day. I just want to acknowledge, if you've never participated in this, sometimes playoff day gets a little crazy because parents be crazy. I can't say that any other way. This is the clearest way I can say. I want to acknowledge, I usually don't do this to call out our team. I want to acknowledge Paul and your staff and the amazing work you've done over the last couple years. Yeah. Just to remake, reshape the culture, not just of what is happening there, but in the desire of all of youth sports that we would be developmental and cared about the individual and not just their talent and ability. I am oh so grateful for all your investment and all that you do. Yeah, we can celebrate that again. So I'm over there yesterday, and Parker's coach was supposed to be out, so I was gonna fill in, and then he showed up, so I kind of found myself like in this assistant coach spot, which I typically don't like to do because there's a lot of people who go to the church who are at sports, and I don't really want them to see me on the sidelines screaming at small children and stuff like that. I try to avoid those situations. And so I'm there, and in Parker's game, he cried 3 times. Now, I told him afterwards, I said, you cried 3 times, but you had 4 points. And he goes, thanks, Dad. I say, at least the points was more than the cries. That's all I was looking for. And so he cried one time because a kid fell on him, and he got this huge floor burn up his arm, and it made that awful squeaking sound when you're on the floor. I get that cry. He cried another time because he went for a layup, and Trey poked him in the eye. Trey and our buddies, we're good. We're like, oh my gosh. And then he cried a 3rd time because he got called for a travel that he didn't think was a travel. The first 2 cries I was fine with. The 3rd cry, so he gets to the sideline. It was like one of those things, like once people like, they start crying, they can't stop crying. Like once there's waterworks, there's no shutting that faucet off. I have no idea what that's like. I don't cry. Like I'm not against crying, I just don't. And so this is what people tell me, they can't stop. And so he's already crying, and then he gets called for travel, and so I've got him on the sideline, and he goes, I called for travel. I didn't travel. I was like, first off, bro, you did. And he's like, no, I didn't. I was like, you caught the ball, and then you went like that, and then you passed it. That's a travel. You traveled. But then I pulled him in close, and I said, what I need from you, it doesn't mean to be strong when everything is going right. To be strong is when everything is going wrong and you still maintain the attitude that you know you're supposed to have. And he looked at me in that moment and he just goes, got it. Got it. And I need the same thing for you today, is to be able to go, to conform is when you look at the way you're living and you give the excuse of everything in your life that has gone wrong. When you look at the way that you're living and you go, but I got this and I got that and this is a lot. And we say, in that moment, what is happening is you are being conformed to the pattern of this world and you're allowing your situation to dictate the level of faith that you have. And he says, do not let your outer world remake your inner world. Be the kind of person where your inner world remakes how you view everything else that you see in your life. Come on, let me preach this to you a little more clearly. I want to run straight into this. The idea, there's this moment in scripture in which Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're thrown into the fiery furnace. And all of a sudden, the edict of the king is anyone who does not bow down and worship this false idol that I have created will be thrown into their furnace. And their response in that moment, this is so important to understand. Their confidence in God was sky high. But there is a world of difference between faith that believes God will act for the outcome that you asked for and faith that is confident in God. Because there are so many of us that we go, I have faith that God will. And then sometimes he doesn't. And the faith that you're called to have is not, I have faith that God will do this specific thing that I know better than everyone else should happen. It is a faith that says, I know God is good regardless of the outcome. And so Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are thrown into the fiery furnace, but before they do, they say, we know that the Lord can spare us from this. We know, let me show it to you directly. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Come on, can I preach to you today? A transformed faith says, I know he can, but even if he doesn't, he's still good. I know he's powerful too, but even if it doesn't work out how I thought it would work out, I'm confident that my God holds all things in his hand, holds all things. Come on, I believe there's someone here today that you're going, I'm in a relationship that I've asked God to move. I'm in a situation in which I've asked God to act, and I want him to. But even if he doesn't, my praise still goes to him. Even if he doesn't, my confidence is still in him. Come on, let your praise be the weapon that brings the enemy down in this moment. Let your praise be the weapon that breaks the struggle and shackles in your life in this moment. Come on, let's keep going. Let's keep going. Grab a seat. I got more work. And so Rahab is referred to in Joshua 2 as Rahab the prostitute. But in Matthew 1, oh, you know it's getting good when we're getting into the genealogy of Jesus. You're like, what are we doing in the genealogy of Jesus? Matthew chapter 1 lists the record of those who were born. And in Matthew chapter 1, verse 5, it says, Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Now we know from Joshua 6 that Rahab escaped from the cemetery that Jericho became and lived among the Israelites. Now we know she gets married to Salmon. She has a son, Boaz. Boaz was the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. Rahab was the great grandmother of the giant slayer, the man after God's own heart, King David. Oh wait, it gets better. Because 14 generations after David, Jesus was born. And so Rahab is the great grandmother of Jesus. Wait. In Judges 2, she's known as the prostitute. In Matthew 1, she is royalty. You might be loyal to a lie. Just because it got in your head first doesn't mean it's supposed to stay. Just because someone spoke it over you doesn't make it right. Just because it was correct in a previous season doesn't mean it has any right to be in your next season that God has prepared for you. See, why do we believe the first thing in our life in a given moment is the thing that is meant there to be there permanently? Can I make it really clear? Not all of your friends should get promoted to the next season. Some of them need to stay in the position that they're in because they have no business being in your next season. Not all of your habits need to make their way into what God is doing next in your life. It needs to stay in the spot that it's in for God to move how He's called you to move. Let me make it more clear. John chapter 20. Now I'm going to have fun. John chapter 20, we looked at Judges 2, which is the account of the cemetery that Jericho became. John chapter 20 is the story of the tomb. We move from one cemetery to another cemetery, from one tomb to another tomb. In John chapter 20, we find the tomb of Jesus. This is why this is so important. You go, why are we talking about tombs and cemeteries? Because a tomb is not specifically a tomb by design. A tomb is simply a room with dead people in it. And you may be in more tombs than you actually realize. Because if you're lingering around what is dysfunctional and dead in your life, you're in a tomb. If you're lingering around what God is no longer breathing in, you're in a tomb. If you're lingering around what God is no longer blessing, you're stuck in a tomb. And we go, but Jesus came out of the tomb, right? Jesus was resurrected from the tomb, right? But in John chapter 20, verse 6 and 7, this is what it reads. It says, then Simon Peter came along behind him, this is John, and they went straight into the tomb. This is after they received word from the women that Jesus was no longer in the tomb. He is not dead. He has risen and has rose from the grave. They went straight into the tomb, and he saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus's head. The cloth was still lying in its place separate from the linen. You go, Kevin, why do we care about the strips of linen and the cloth that was around Jesus's head? Because Jesus came out of the tomb, but not everything came with him. Sometimes we're asking God to resurrect what was meant to stay in the tomb. Sometimes we're asking God to bring life to what has no business in your life. and your sense of loyalty is holding you back from the future that God has for you. Can I preach this real simple to you today? There are some things that are meant to come out of the tomb. And there are other things in order for resurrection to happen. There are other things in order for resurrection to happen that have to stay in the grave where they belong. And you have to be able to look at your life and you have to be able to go, I am not loyal to what is dysfunctional. I am not loyal to a lie. Just because it was there first doesn't mean it has any business in my future life. Yes, this thing served a purpose for a season, but it's time for it to stay in the tomb, for me to step into what God has for me. Stand up real quickly. Let me illustrate this one more time. Thomas, I need you for one more second, and then we'll celebrate together. Let me show you real quickly. Can we look at this again? What's this say? Exit. If I'm going to step into the next thing God has for me, I can't walk into the next room until the current room. God has a future for you, but in order for you to enter what is next, you have to exit what is now.